No, I mean, our next guest is Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, and it takes something to go out on a limb for Donald Trump. And in an op-ed piece this morning on CNBC.com, Trump campaign economic advisor Andy Puzder joins more than 100 businessmen and women in support of Donald Trump's pro-growth economic plan. Andy Puzder joins us now. He's the CEO of CKE Restaurants. And if it was just the economic plan, I figure maybe a lot of business leaders would be joining up, Andy. That's not what keeps a lot of prominent business leaders from backing Donald Trump. It's all the other stuff, the focus for the last, well, you're in the world. You know what the focus has been on. How do you square that as a CEO where you need Democrats and Republicans and men and women to come into Carl's Jr.? Do you worry about the PR problems of backing Mr. Trump? You've obviously gotten beyond that.
Well, there's always risk when you come out and support a political candidate or take a political position. But I mean, I think people understand that CEOs are just like everybody else. They have the right to their own views on political issues. And in fact, if I didn't feel that way, I couldn't go to the movies because there's hardly a movie star out there whose political positions I support. So I'd have to stop attending the theater. You just have to look beyond. It's America. You're allowed to support the candidates you want and believe what you want.
I mean, Hillary only had 11 of the S&P 100. Romney, if you looked at his plans, all 100 of the Fortune 100 CEOs probably should have been on Romney's side. He only had 28, so he didn't even have a third of those. So these guys, I wonder about them sometimes. I mean, sometimes I think they support people for crony capitalism, not necessarily for what's good in terms of what we know from, from hundreds of years of free market economics and how capitalism works. I can't believe that more of them just, don't sign on regardless. But sometimes I think they might support a candidate for crony capitalism, for what the candidate can do for them, not for free market principles.
And to add a little grit to that, if you think about it, if you've got a large government contract, if you're a large business, you do a lot of business with the government, which controls a lot of the economy at this point, you want the government to grow. You want more government spending. And you want the people you're negotiating with to be government types. You don't want to have the kind of people in there that really know how to negotiate a deal. And you want to buy influence.
I know exactly what you're talking about, too. We don't need to mention any names of the huge multinationals that Andrew's having a heart attack over here. He's going to have to get in. Do you have anyone in the 100 that you're talking about that are bona fide New York Times CEOs, or are these guys just outliers? Andrew, you want to take it from here, tell them that these guys are hicks, or who are these guys?
No, I have a different question, which is to say, how did you feel about his comments about women?
First of all, I'm not here to be a Donald Trump apologist. I'm here to talk about the economic issues. I think there are much more important issues than the personal deficiencies of these candidates. I'm sorry?
You can't separate his values and whatever you think he represents economically and what he has said. Let me read. I just want to read this to you, and then I want you to tell me what you think of this. This is your own ethics policy at your restaurants, and so I'm curious whether you get to keep your job under these circumstances. You say, this is prohibited. Requests for dates, sexual favors, unwelcome sexual advances, comments, actions, offensive jokes, slurs, or other offensive verbal or physical behavior, or any similar conduct that creates, encourages, or permits an intimidating, offensive, or hostile work environment. Would any of his comments come under those categories?
Well, it depends upon whether they're true or not. Look, Andrew, let me answer your question. First of all, we've got two candidates here that aren't perfect people. I view one of them as a very corrupt, very dishonest, power-hungry candidate, much like a Richard Nixon type. And I view the other one as more of an alpha male, John Kennedy, Bill Clinton type candidate. And if I've got to choose between a Bill Clinton, John Kennedy type candidate and a Richard Nixon type candidate, I'm gonna go with the John Kennedy, Bill Clinton type candidate because I think they would make a better president. And I think corruption does serious damage to the United States. So you've got to look at these things. You can't just take Donald Trump out and look at him like there's no other candidates in this race. He's running against somebody with her own record and her own personality problems. And quite honestly, I'm not here to talk about the tabloid aspects of this candidacy. If you want to talk about economic issues, that's great. If you want to talk about the tabloid aspects of the campaign, you should find somebody that's an expert on that. I'm not.
I disagree with you on one point, Joe, on the economic issues. A lot of the CEOs we talk to, and a question for you on this, Andy, you want to talk about the economic issues, are worried about Trump's policies on trade. They're worried about the rhetoric about threatening Chinese tariffs on its imports 40%, Mexico 30%, and they're worried that it's not exactly realistic to negotiate a more than 2-decade-old trade deal with our closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. Why are you confident, and what would you tell a CEO of a global multinational that is very afraid of that kind of policy?
Well, number one, if you're going to negotiate better trade deals, and look, if you're a globalist, if your company is dependent on bad trade deals to manufacture your goods overseas and to get the benefits of low labor and lax environmental laws that raise the cost of manufacturing, then you're going to want to vote for Hillary Clinton because you're going to want those bad trade deals to stay in place. On NAFTA, the president of Mexico, when Donald Trump visited down there, said he thought that they could renegotiate NAFTA. Hillary Clinton has said she wants to renegotiate NAFTA. So I wouldn't break NAFTA out and say renegotiating that is a problem. I'd say if you're going to go in and negotiate with people, the first rule of any negotiation is you have to be able to walk away from the table. If the other side doesn't believe you're going to walk away, if they don't believe you'll do what you say you're going to do, you're going to get a bad deal like the deals that we have now. So when Donald Trump talks about maybe imposing a tariff or doing something that would be bad for the economy of countries that are trade partners, because he doesn't want American companies to have to disclose trade secrets when they do business in another country. He doesn't want trade monetary currency manipulation out there. He doesn't want them to impose taxes that run contrary to the intent of the deal, even though they're not tariffs. When he talks about renegotiating these deals, you want to go in with your strongest position. He said trade's important. Everybody knows trade's important. What's not important are massive trade deficits, which hurt American workers, close paths to the middle class, and destroy American manufacturing. So we're going to negotiate these deals. We're going to negotiate good deals. There will be trade, but we'll protect American workers and American companies from unfair practices by other trade partners. Free trade has got to be fair trade, and we don't have fair trade.
And do you worry at all that we're going to run up the debt? And one of the things that's so interesting is he plans to cut taxes, and perhaps that will spur the economy in ways that we don't fully appreciate at the moment. But on the other end, we're not cutting back on anything.
Yeah, if you look at what the Tax Foundation did an analysis of Hillary Clinton's tax plan and also Donald Trump's tax plan, and they use a plan that isn't static. It actually looks at what kind of impact the plans would have on economic growth. They found that her plan would reduce GDP by 2.6%, and as you know, GDP has been horrible. It's been anemic. It's 1% so far this year, 2% since the recession ended, and that we would lose 700,000 jobs with her plan. With Donald Trump's plan, they said we would at least have an increase in GDP growth of about 7% and add about 2 million jobs. So when you increase GDP, when you increase revenues, when you increase business profits and personal incomes, you also increase tax revenues, which allows you to reduce the deficit. And if you have enough deficit reduction, you can actually reduce the debt. So no, I don't worry that a pro-growth, very positive plan to grow the economy is going to drive us deeper into debt or increase our deficit. I think it's going to do exactly the opposite. As Steve Forbes thinks we'll have 6 or 7% GDP growth, and Steve's a very smart guy. I tend to agree with him.
Okay, I was going to ask you about the 100 because I know that you didn't ask him, but none of the you don't have any of the S&P 100 guys. They're all chicken. I mean, you don't have any of those guys in there, do you, Andy? I mean, they've got.
Look, I don't know who's in the S&P 100. I know we've got
the 100 that you have, the guys that signed on to your letter. These 100 business guys.
Right.
So do we know any of them? Who are they?
Well, you got Harold Hamm with Continental Resources,
right.
One of the people that really developed the fracking technique. You've got Carl Icahn, who everybody knows.
Wilbur Ross, I guess.
You've got Wilbur Ross. You've got Bernie Marcus with Home Depot.
Right.
You've got Bill Foley at Fidelity National Financial. I mean, there are an array of people that are very prominent business leaders in this list. I encourage people to read it. But we also intentionally included small business leaders, small business CEOs, small business owners, because They are the ones who are dependent on GDP growth to see their businesses do better. These other companies may be dependent on trade deals, or they may be dependent on government contracts, or they may want to influence how much the government regulates them. But small businesses are the ones who are affected by GDP. They're the ones who create jobs. They're the ones who can lead us out of this non-recovery recovery, and they're on the list.
Excellent. So not all miscreants, misogynists, and racists. So there were some normal people. Anyway, Andy, thank you. That's surprising to some of us here. That's good. Anyway, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.